Most folks think when a hen goes off her lay, quits settling easy at night, or starts looking worn out for no clear reason, she's just aging out, feeling the weather, or getting difficult. But if I had a bird do that on my place, the first thing I'd check is the thing most people never think to check at all. I'd wait till full dark, take a flashlight to the coop, and look into the cracks. Because more times than not, when a flock starts slipping and nobody can put a finger on why, the trouble is not in the feed, and it is not in the breed, and it is not in the season. It is mites, tiny little pests you can miss in broad daylight, hiding where the wood joins, coming out only when the hens go still. And if you do not know that trick, you can stand there in the daytime, looking straight at the problem, and swear your birds are clean. I have knocked chicken mites back in old coops and new ones without putting harsh poison near the hens or the eggs. And the method is about as plain as anything on a farm ever is. It comes down to 3 cheap things and 1 steady habit. That is the part folks tend to miss. They want a one-time treatment, something they can spray once and forget. But mites are not the kind of problem you beat with 1 burst of effort and then never think about again. You beat them by understanding where they live, how they feed, what keeps them going, and what breaks their cycle. Once you understand that, the whole job gets a lot less mysterious. So let me start with the mite that causes the most quiet damage, because if you understand this one first, the rest of it falls into place. The red mite, some call it the roost mite, fools more chicken keepers than any other, because it usually does not stay on the bird. That is the whole trick. That is why people miss it. They pick up a hen in the daytime, part her feathers, do not see much of anything, and decide the bird must be all right. Meanwhile, every night that hen is getting climbed on while she sleeps. The mite spends the day tucked away in cracks, seams, corners, under roost bars, behind nest box lips, anywhere the coop gives it a dark place to wait. Then once the birds settle down and the lights go out, those mites come crawling out to feed and slip right back into the woodwork before morning. So you can have a flock-losing condition night after night and never lay eyes on the cause unless you know when to look. And the damage they do is not small, just because they are small. A bad load of mites will take the bloom right out of a good layer. Comb goes pale, energy drops, egg count slips, birds start avoiding the coop, or they seem restless on the roost, or they do not settle right. A younger or weaker bird can get hit even harder. I am not trying to scare you for the sake of it. That is just what blood loss and poor rest do over time. A bird that ought to be using her strength to lay, forage, and hold condition winds up spending that strength getting through the night. And because it happens gradually, folks often blame something else. They blame age, they blame heat, they blame feed, they blame temperament. All the while, the real thief is hiding in the cracks. So here is how you catch them in the act. And it does not cost you a thing. Go out after dark with a flashlight and take a white rag, white paper towel, or any light cloth you do not mind ruining. Run it hard along the underside of the roost, into the joints where boards meet, around the ends of the roost where it sits in its supports, and into the seams of the nest boxes. If red mites are there, you may see tiny moving specks, but the real tell comes when you crush them against that white cloth and get a rusty red smear. That stain is blood, your hen's blood. That is the moment the whole problem becomes plain, and you want to do this at night for a reason. In the daytime they are hidden. Daytime can lie to you. Night tells the truth. Always start with the roost ends if you are not sure where to begin. Places where one piece of wood fits into another are favored hiding spots. Especially old dry wood with hairline cracks and seams you can barely see unless the light catches them. Old timers were right on that much. Trouble settles where the wood gives it shelter. And once you know where the mites are holed up, the fix gets a lot more practical. The first tool is probably the one you have already heard somebody mention, but there is a right way to use it and a wrong way, and most of the bad talk around it comes from people using it poorly. I mean food-grade diatomaceous earth. I want to say food-grade plainly, because the wrong kind has no business near birds. This powder is not acting like a poison. That is important to understand. It is ground from fossilized remains of tiny organisms, and the particles are sharp on a small scale. What it does is damage the outer coating of the mite, so the pest dries out and dies. That means the whole method depends on dryness. Keep that in mind, because that is the key to why it works, and also the key to why some folks swear it does nothing. Used right, it is a fine old tool. Used carelessly in a damp coop, it disappoints and gets blamed for a failure that really came from moisture. But before I get to that limit, let me tell you how I would use it if I wanted the job done properly the first time. Strip the coop first. Pull the old bedding out completely. If you know you have an active mite problem, do not just toss that bedding in a little heap beside the run where pests can work their way back. Bag it or haul it well away. Then take the powder and work it where the mites actually live. That is the point that matters. Too many people dust the open floor, make everything look chalky, and think they have done something. The floor is not the main battlefield. The cracks are, the seams are, the ends of the roost are, the corners of the nest boxes are, the underside of boards is. Anywhere two pieces meet and make a thin sheltered line, that is where you want the powder. A squeeze bottle, dust puffer, or even a cleaned-out kitchen bottle with a narrow top can help you drive it deep into those little hiding places. Dust the roost, top, and bottom. Dust along the joints. Dust behind lips and edges. Dust the nest boxes, especially in the seams and corners. A light dusting on the floor under fresh bedding is fine, but do not let that be the whole treatment. You are not trying to make the coop look white. You are trying to get the powder exactly where the mites pass and exactly where they bed down. Wear a dust mask while you do it. Keep the hens out till the air clears, and take care not to make a great cloud where they or you have to breathe it. Used thoughtfully, it is a practical part of the job. Used carelessly, it becomes more nuisance than help. That is the bones of it. But now comes the part that separates a good result from a frustrating one. Diatomaceous earth only earns its keep when it stays dry. That is the honest truth of it. If the coop is damp, if there is a leak, if the bedding stays wet in a corner, if summer humidity turns everything clammy, the powder clumps, and loses the edge that makes it useful, then people dust and dust and dust and cannot figure out why the mites keep right on. The answer is usually not that the powder never worked. The answer is that the coop conditions robbed it of what makes it work. A damp coop will beat a dry powder every time. So if you are fighting mites in a wet season, do not fool yourself into thinking more powder alone is the answer. Fix the roof, get the bedding dry, improve the airflow, open the place up. Let moving air and dryness become part of the treatment, or you will keep circling the same problem. That is a hard lesson for folks because powder feels like action. You can buy it. You can hold it in your hand. You can see where you dusted. But dryness and airflow are less satisfying because they feel ordinary. Still, ordinary is what wins this fight. A coop that stays dry gives mites less comfort and gives the powder a chance to do what it is meant to do. A coop that stays damp lets them hang on. So if somebody tells you to toss a little powder around and call the job done, that is usually a sign they have not had to wrestle a real infestation through a muggy spell. The powder is a tool. It is not magic. The real trick is knowing the conditions it needs and making the coop support the treatment instead of defeating it. Now, the second piece of this is one your birds will handle, partly on their own if you give them the chance, and that is a proper dry dust bath. Chickens are built to manage a good share of skin trouble by working dust through their feathers. When they dig down, flop over, and throw fine dry dirt through themselves, they are not just amusing themselves, they are doing maintenance. That habit helps with pests that spend time on the bird rather than off it, and even when you are mainly fighting red mites in the coop, a good dust bath still strengthens the flock's everyday defense. Give them loose, dry dirt, a little sand if you like to keep it open, and clean wood ash from untreated hardwood. Keep it under cover so weather does not turn it into mud. The whole point is that it stays dry, fine, and available. A lot of coops and runs never really give birds a decent place to dust. Then folks wonder why the hens seem bothered and rough. If the bath is soaked, compacted, or exposed to rain, it is not doing much good. But a covered bath that stays light and dry becomes a free form of daily pest control. Some keepers stir a little food-grade powder into it, and that can be useful so long as the bath remains dry, and you are not making a dusty storm of it. What matters most is that the hens can get to it whenever they feel the need. Birds often know before you do that something is irritating them. A flock with access to good dry dust is working on the problem every day, instead of waiting for you to notice it on a Saturday afternoon. The third part is the part people remember least, though it may be the part that matters most. It is not another product. It is rhythm. Mites breed fast, especially in warm weather, and that means a one-time cleaning can appear to work and still fail in the long run. You knock back the live pests you can reach, feel encouraged, and then a week or two later, the problem is back, and you think the treatment was no good. Most times, it was not that the treatment failed. It is that the cycle was not finished. Eggs left tucked in the cracks hatch after you are done congratulating yourself. So if you want them gone, you cannot stop at one pass. You clean and dust thoroughly, then go back about a week later, and then again roughly a week after that. That is how you break the hatch cycle. 3 passes, about a week apart through warm weather, is the plain old rhythm that saves people the most grief. The first pass knocks down what is active. The second catches what hatched behind you. The third shuts the door on the next wave. After that, the job becomes lighter. You are not fighting a war anymore. You are maintaining a standard. That is an easier burden to carry. A quick night check here and there, a fresh dusting when bedding is changed, attention to damp spots before they become chronic, and the whole thing stays manageable. But if you skip the follow-up, because the coop looks better after one cleanup, you leave the back door open. That is where a lot of folks lose patience, and then blame the method, when really they quit in the middle. Let me put the cost of this plainly, because I always think it helps to know what a problem is costing you, and what a solution is really asking of you. A bag of food-grade powder is not much money for a small flock. Dirt, sand, and clean ash are near free if you have them handy. A bottle to puff powder into cracks can be made from something you already own. A mask is cheap. So for very little cash and a couple weekends of paying attention, you can spare yourself a lot of lost laying, a lot of misery in the birds, and a lot of temptation to reach for stronger chemicals you may not want anywhere near the eggs. That last piece matters. Plenty of flock keepers can tolerate inconvenience. What they do not like is wondering whether a treatment belongs in the same place their family's eggs are coming from. That is why this old method still appeals. And while we are on the subject, there is another mite trouble folks sometimes mix up with this one, and if you mistake one for the other, you can waste a good stretch of time working the wrong place. If a hen's leg scales start lifting and looking rough, crusty, or thick, instead of lying smooth and flat, You are often dealing with scaly leg mites, not the hidden red kind in the coop cracks. That one burrows under the leg scales. The old simple way to handle it is to smother it. Coat the legs gently with plain petroleum jelly or a simple bit of oil. Repeat every few days, and let the grease seal things off. The bird usually needs time after that for the legs to smooth back out as healing runs its course. The important thing is not to start picking at crusts or tearing at old scales. Treat gently and let the bird recover in its own time. Now let me make one distinction that saves a lot of confusion, because when people say mites, they often mean three different problems and talk about them as though they were all the same. Red mites live mostly in the coop and visit the bird at night. That is why you detect them with a flashlight and white cloth in the cracks. Northern fowl mites do the opposite. They spend their time on the bird, especially around the vent and tail area where it stays warm. So if a bird seems bothered in the daytime, and you part the feathers around the back end and see dark, crawling specks, or a dirty, crusty buildup at the feather bases, then you are likely looking at a mite that lives on the hen, not just in the coop. Same family of trouble, different address. And if you do not know the address, you can spend weeks treating empty real estate. That is why the treatment angle shifts just a little. For a mite that lives on the bird, the dust bath matters even more, and a careful direct dusting on the bird herself around the vent area can help so long as you are gentle. Keep it away from the eyes and beak, and do not turn the job into a cloud. For the hidden red mite, you win the battle mainly in the coop. For the on-bird mite, you have to meet it on the bird as well. Same plain tools, different target. That one distinction can save a person a full month of feeling busy while the flock keeps suffering. Once you know whether the pest is bedding down in the wood or riding on the hen, you stop guessing and start getting somewhere. There is also a season to all this, and if you keep that season in mind, you can often stay ahead of the worst of it. Warm weather is when mite pressure tends to climb. Late spring through early fall is when I would be most watchful. Before that warm stretch really gets going, a thorough cleanout and dusting of the coop can knock down whatever carried over in the cracks. That is easier than waiting until midsummer when the birds are already stressed and the pest numbers have had time to build. Through the warm months, it pays to make a habit of checking the roost ends at night every couple of weeks, more often if a bird starts acting off. Once hard cold comes and pressure drops, the job usually eases. The main thing is to remember that spring looking ahead is far easier than summer reacting late. If you tie that first serious cleanout to some marker you already remember every year, it helps. Same week you set the garden out. Same week you service the mower. Same week you swap from winter chores to summer ones. When a habit has a place on the calendar, it gets done before the trouble gets ahead of you. That is better than waiting until a hen is pale and your egg basket is getting light. Mites like the keeper who is always a little late. A routine hurts them more than any burst of frustration ever will. And routine matters here because the whole enemy is built around going unnoticed. The more regular your checks, the fewer surprises you get. A small flock rewards that kind of attention better than just about any purchased cure does. Let me save you from the mistakes that undo people over and over, because it is usually the same handful. First, do not assume harsh cleaning products are the answer. A coop that smells strong is not the same thing as a coop that is mite-free, and heavy cleaners in a tight bird space can be harder on lungs than they are on pests. Good cleaning, dryness, and targeted dusting beat the theatrics of over-scrubbing with something harsh. Second, do not bring a new bird straight into your clean flock just because she looked fine at first glance. A swap bird or auction bird can carry trouble in with her, and one careless introduction can set you back. Give newcomers a little time apart, inspect them well, and deal with any obvious pest issue before mixing them in. Third, read the bag. Food grade means food grade. Anything made for pool filters is not the same thing and should not be treated like it is. That is a mistake nobody wants to make twice. Fourth, and this may be the most common of all, do not stop after the first cleaning just because you feel relieved. The relief is exactly what gets people. They clean once, see improvement, and tell themselves the problem is done. Meanwhile, the next hatch is already waiting in the cracks. If you remember nothing else from this, remember that one. The second and third passes are not extra credit. They are part of the cure. Leave them out and you have probably only knocked the problem back instead of ending it. Here is the deeper point I would want anybody to carry away, because it matters more than any one powder or trick. A clean, dry, airy coop is the real answer. Everything else is cleanup after the conditions have already gone the wrong direction. Mites love darkness, dampness, narrow shelter, stale air, neglected corners, old bedding left too long, and wood joints nobody inspects. Take those comforts away from them and the fight changes. Give the coop better airflow, keep bedding dry, stay on top of leaks. Avoid letting birds crowd tighter than they should. Check the corners. Dust where the problem lives instead of where it is easiest to reach. When the environment stops helping the mites, all the small, simple treatments suddenly work better. Then you are not stuck in a cycle of rescue. You are just maintaining a sound little house for the flock. That matters because people often want a trick when what they really need is a system. The title may say trick, but the reason the old way works is not because somebody stumbled onto a miracle dust. It works because the old keepers understood that pests cannot flourish as easily where there is dryness, light, fresh bedding, air movement, and regular inspection. The powder supports that. The dust bath supports that. The three-pass rhythm supports that. But the foundation is the coop itself. Once you see that, the whole thing becomes less about chasing pests and more about denying them a home. That mindset shift is what makes the job feel manageable instead of endless. It is not glamorous advice, but it is the sort that holds up season after season. I do want to say one plain welfare word here, because there is a point where a gentle home method is not the whole answer anymore. If a bird is already badly weakened, very pale in the comb, drooping, off her feet, or clearly in distress, then you are dealing with more than a routine cleanup. Separate her, keep her warm, see that she has food and water, and get local poultry guidance where you can. A steady old method is a fine backbone for prevention and for ordinary infestations, but a bird in real trouble deserves faster attention than pride or thrift should ever delay. There is no shame in recognizing when the case in front of you has moved beyond a simple coop treatment. What matters is not winning some purity contest about old methods. What matters is the hen. Now let me put some numbers to why this matters, because mites cost more than people tend to reckon. A laying hen under a heavy mite load is not just mildly inconvenienced, she is spending blood and rest every single night. A bird in that shape often cuts back laying hard because survival comes first. If a decent layer that ought to be giving you several eggs a week falls away for long enough, and the same thing starts happening across several hens, you are paying feed bills on production you never see. Add the strain on the birds themselves and the possibility of losing weaker pullets, and suddenly the little hidden pest you did not notice becomes one of the more expensive leaks on the place. Compared with that, a cheap bag of powder, a dry bath, and a few careful evenings with a flashlight are small medicine. And here is something else people want to know once they begin treatment. How do you tell whether it is really working other than just hoping. Watch the birds first. A hen that had gone pale should begin to color back up as the pressure lifts. She should settle better at night. She should look less bothered. Over a little time, laying ought to begin climbing back toward normal, if mites were the main drag on the flock. Then watch the coop itself. Keep using that white cloth at night, along the roost ends and the cracks. The cloth tells the truth better than wishful thinking does. If you stop finding live movement and stop getting those rusty smears check after check, then you know you are not just guessing anymore. The clean cloth is the clearest sign the cycle has finally been broken. Still, even when you get that clean result, do not make the mistake of thinking you never need to look again. A clean result is not permission to stop paying attention. It is proof that your habits are working. That is a different thing. The people who stay ahead of mites are not the ones who perform one heroic cleanup. They are the ones who keep the coop from sliding quietly back into the same old conditions. Fresh bedding on time, damp fixed quickly, roost ends checked now and then, dust bath kept usable, new birds watched before mixing. Those little acts look almost too simple to matter, and yet they matter more than nearly anything else. Most ugly flock problems start with small neglects stacked on top of one another. Most steady flock health comes from small corrections done in time. So if I were walking my own place through a bad mite spell, this is how the whole thing would go. After dark, flashlight in hand, I would inspect the cracks, roost ends, and board joints with a white cloth until I knew exactly what I was dealing with. If I got that rusty smear, I would strip the coop, haul the bedding out properly, and work food-grade powder deep into the seams, cracks, undersides, nest corners, and roost fittings where the mites actually hide. I would keep the birds out till the dust settled, then bring back fresh dry bedding. I would make sure the dust bath was truly dry and covered, not just present in name only. Then I would go back in about a week and do it again, and again the following week, so I was not leaving the hatch behind me to start over. At the same time, I would fix whatever in the coop had been helping the problem along. If there was a leak, fix it. If a dead corner never dried, change that. If airflow was poor, improve it. If the birds were too packed, relieve it. If a new bird had recently come in, I would look hard at her as the likely doorway the trouble used. Because once you begin looking at the whole setup, instead of just one symptom, the problem starts making more sense. Mites are opportunists. They thrive where routine slips. And that is useful to remember because it means the answer is not beyond your reach. It is in the same plain things that keep most farm troubles from taking root in the first place. Dryness, cleanliness, watchfulness, and not letting little corners go. That is why this old method has lasted. Not because it sounds grand, not because it comes in a bright bottle, not because it gives you the thrill of doing something modern. It lasts because it matches the problem. Mites hide in the coop, so you inspect the coop. They gather in cracks, so you treat the cracks. They depend on timing, so you break the timing. They do better in damp neglect, so you dry and clean the place. They weaken birds quietly, so you learn the quiet signs before the flock is in trouble. There is a lot of comfort in that once you see it plainly. You do not need mystery. You do not need panic. You need a flashlight, a dry coop, 3 cheap helps, and the good sense not to stop halfway through. The old practical ways were never about doing the least. They were about doing what fit the problem, and doing it steadily enough that the problem could not keep getting a foothold. That is the heart of this whole subject. Look after the coop, and the coop will do more of the work for you. Ignore the corners, and the corners will fill up with things that feed on your flock when you are asleep. So if your hens have seemed a little off, and the cause has not been making sense, Do yourself the favor of checking when the pests are actually active. Go out tonight after dark. Bring the flashlight. Wipe those cracks. Look at the roost ends. Let the coop tell you the truth. You may find the answer has been there all along, hiding where most folks never think to look.